And I'd like to call. There we go. Today is April 27th, 2022. And I'd like to call the regular monthly meeting of the Katuitt Fire District's Water Commission to order. Present are Commissioners Horsley and Hoppenstead. We expect Commissioner Robinson at some point here. Office Manager Mrs. Nash and Superintendent Mr. Wiseman. We also have some guests with us that are going to help present, as well as one of the water department operators, Matt Dwyer, and our consultant and septic system extraordinaire, Jennifer Laughlin. So thank you all for joining us. I think I don't have the copy of the agenda up right now, but I'm going to defer public comment at this point and ask that Superintendent Wiseman provide his report for the commissioners.
All right, no problem. Superintendent's report read on April 27th, 2022. In March of 2021, we pumped 6,578,000 gallons of water. In March of 2022, we pumped 9,048,000 gallons of water for an increase of 2,470,000 gallons of water. We started flushing this year early, so that's why I believe we have such an increase there. Usually we don't start till April flushing, and we wanted to start a little early because we had the weather and we were having some troubles, and JR suggested that we get out there and do it, and so we did. Underneath general discussion, we did have 2 new services installed in March. One over on Old Post Road and one on Raylan Road, and 1 replacement service over on Old Post Road. As I mentioned before, we started flushing, and we're just about half done. Talking to JR, he thinks we have approximately 2 to 3 weeks left, and we should be finished, which would be earlier than ever for us. We've been doing a valve exercising program out there. John's been going around exercising them in between work and everything else, and he's been doing that for quite a little while, and he's probably about 3/4 of the way through the town also. So routine maintenance has been going on and on throughout the time. As Scott probably noticed, Little River is flowing quite lovely right now. Cape Cod mosquito control went into Lovell's Pond itself and dug out the outflow pipe back probably 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and it almost flooded out beside us with the old cranberry bog is there. We got water right on the side of the lawn again, like we used to have back probably 5-6 years ago over there. So the water's flowing great. A lot of people have seen the improvement. A lot of people are thanking people out there. I'm getting phone calls, thank you, and I'm deferring them out to the mosquito control because they were the guys that went in there and did it. And I did check, as I do weekly, we're still in the 50 percentile with water levels right now, just like last month, even though I heard on the news yesterday that we have approximately 1 inch less rain than we usually do on an average year right now, even. But then again, we got rain last night, so who knows, we might be fine. Other than that, that's my report.
Nice. Any questions from any of the commissioners or any of the public? Hi, Mark Robinson.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, Mark.
Hi, Scott.
Oh, Mark.
Have a friend with me.
Captain Gaines.
Just
All
passing
right.
through.
Okay, anything else on the superintendent's report?
That'll do. So
Do you want to run through your water quality report real quick, Chris?
Sure. We had no total coliform violations at all. We are right now awaiting. We did not get sodium results from March. Right now we're awaiting them. We didn't get to take them till a couple weeks ago, so we're waiting those. We did go out and take our PFAS samples. We're awaiting those results, nitrates and asbestos. So those are the same results that you saw last, I believe, last meeting.
Correct.
Yeah. So we're awaiting results on all the other stuff now, but we did have no violations in total cold form.
Right. Okay, any questions on the water quality report? Hearing none. I would like to move on to old business because we have a couple of students that would like to present some proposals to us and some of the work that they've done. And I think we'd like to give them the courtesy of having a timely meeting here. They have other things going on. So Scott, do you want to take?
Yeah, I'll
control?
I'll make a very brief introduction. We're gonna have two presentations, both of them in the order of 5, 7, 8 minutes. So we'll try to keep this pretty brief. Casey will go first, and you met Casey before. He's working on the project that is looking at the possibility of installing some innovative and alternative septics within the Zone 2 area that we talked about, I think a couple meetings ago. So he's going to give an update on that. And then Peter Federico will follow him with a presentation on some work he's been doing at the Kituit Elementary School property, looking at some of the sustainability and water quality issues. So I'm not going to say much more than that because I want to give them the time. So maybe we can do a couple Q&A between each one, if that makes sense, Tom. But at this point, I guess I just turn it over to Casey. I think they each have a slideshow. So as long as they're enabled to go, I think I saw Casey is ready to go. So Casey, why don't I just turn it over to you at this point?
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much. Is that coming through for everybody, and can
That's
everyone
good.
Yes.
hear and see me
That's good.
okay? Okay, great. So yeah, thank you again for inviting me to work on this. Essentially, I've put together a few slides here on sort of feasibility report and how other pilots have gone, what other things are doing. The system that the other pilots seem to be using most frequently, a little bit of background about that, and then a few cost options, subsidy options, a few comments on that, and then some information around homeowner outreach engagement and community engagement. So just a tiny background on this. This is the graph of nitrate results for well 1. And the reason for well 1 is both well 1 and well 5 have seen some increases, especially in recent years. But well 1 is a well that we have the contributing area modeled for by Tom Cumberari. And so I was able to use that in GIS and overlay that with the parcels in the Zone 2 and get a clip of the parcel numbers and the owners in the area. And so that depending on which, whether we use the average contributing area or the summer contributing area, there's about 40 or 20 parcels to sort of focus on. And I think before the study, would move forward, the sites of the septics would need to be confirmed on each parcel and whatnot, but this is a good starting place. And just one thing worth mentioning is that these are almost all residential properties, but there are a couple of tax exempt parcels in here, one for the Kituit Center for the Arts and one for the Fall Bishop Church. And those could be, potentially more important parcels, considering that there could be increased people coming in and out and increased nitrogen loads from those septics. So a little background info on some of the other pilots that have been going on. There's been 3 locally that I've been able to identify. The first one was on Tisbury and Martha's Vineyard. And all of these, it should be said, they all sort of partnered in terms of funding and oversight and grants from some places, matching funds, things like that. And I think that would be the way to try to move forward here too. These are all using the Nitro system, which is a septic developed by the Clean2 Technologies. And it's been shown to be really, really effective. And some of these pilots, like the West Falmouth one, used a variety of systems, and the data has been showing that the Nitro is among the most effective, if not the most effective. And I should also say that originally the first demo that was done was at the Mass Alternative Septic Test Center. That was able to get a pilot permit from Mass DEP, which was in place for the Tisbury pilot, and then that has since moved to a provisional permit now. And after there's a total of 50 systems in place, and they're still getting good data, that's expected to move to a general permit. So a tiny bit on the system nitro. Essentially, it's a normal Title V septic, 100% gravity fed flow with the nitro system in between. And there's an aeration chamber and a pump that converts the ammonia to nitrate, which has oxygen on it. And then it moves into the wood chip chamber where the wood chips provide a carbon source for a microbial environment that then converts nitrate to a harmless nitrogen gas. That's passed into the leach pit, which is then moves into the ground. So like I said, nitro was given a provisional permit in Massachusetts by Mass DEP. That happened in 2020. And the main difference there between provisional and general, provisional is there's they're sort of giving an indication that it's effective basically, but they just want to continue to do more monitoring than a regular general permit. So there's quarterly monitoring requirements. They change a little bit depending on whether a home is like seasonally occupied or occupied full time. But that's the main difference. The provisional permits, it's fully above, fully legal, fully like supported. Basically, they actually want some of these projects going forward. So there's no concern there in the regulatory environment. This is a box and whisker chart with some effectiveness data from the Mass TEC. And as you can see there, the median nitrogen in milligrams per liter and effluent coming out of these systems in Barnstable County is only 3 milligrams per liter, which is a really, just very, very effective so far. These systems are much lower nitrogen is coming out of them than the standard Title V septics. And here, this is just some of the individual systems that are up, 19 of them that are up and sort of fully, providing good data. There's several which have been installed too recently to have good data to share, but it's a total of I think at last count, about 34 systems that have been installed, and there are more going on now in the Schubel Pond project. But as you can see here, the average influent is 80 milligrams per liter, and the average effluent is 7.6. So that's a greater than 90% reduction, which is really, really effective. The cost for these systems, it varies a little bit, of course, depending on the property and the context, and whether it's a retrofit versus a replacement. In general, the average comes out to between 25,000 to 30,000 per parcel. And then there are some increased O&M costs, operations and maintenance and monitoring. Those are higher in the first year, and they lower in subsequent years and are expected to lower further as they get general permitting. In general, the comparison here to the cost to connect to a sewer system, which has been estimated at about close to 90 to 100,000. And that's not counting, pumping costs later on, other maintenance costs, whatnot. So these are much more cost effective than that traditional solution. I outlined in the report a few different subsidy options and sort of structures. And I mean, obviously there's lots of flexibility there, and those can be adjusted in any way. But some sort of low subsidy options, we're looking at around 100 to 190,000 total. Mediums were around 250 to 300. And then the highest subsidy option, which would be sort of full coverage for installation and all of the related costs, including operating and monitoring and maintenance, would be about 500,000. There are a couple different potential ways to structure this. We could offer a higher subsidy to homeowners who join earlier, and then a lower subsidy for those who come later on. I my recommendation is that the project try to recruit about 15, somewhere in the range of 15 homeowners in order to really make sure that we're able to see a difference in nitrate testing in the well. Just a quick note that staff costs, I haven't included them because I'm not entirely sure based on some of the other pilots and also just what I was able to come up with on what those costs exactly look like in terms of salaries and how many hours and whatnot. Those are certainly things to consider. And then a note on some outside funding and potential partnerships. There's a lot of momentum here, and there is a lot of funding and a lot of opportunities. And so I think the more connections that Katuitt can make in that way, the better off the pilot will be. So there are potential grants from EPA's Southeast New England program. There are potential grants from the Clean Energy Center and from the Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative. There's also it's worth looking into the possibility of adjusting whether the county septic loan program, which right now provides low interest loans to homeowners with failing systems, whether those funds can be appropriated for upgrades to these new systems. I think there's a good possibility there, but that needs to be sort of investigated further. One thing that I really wanted to highlight is that the EPA currently has a grant out right now for a responsible management entity, which the whole purpose of which would be to sort of facilitate these IA, innovative alternative septic system pilot projects and studies. And so I've heard that it's possible that Mass TC will apply for that. I mean, who knows how exactly that will play out, but that is a potential great opportunity and partnership here in terms of that whoever gets that funding and that develops that entity may be able to take on a lot of the oversight, a lot of the monitoring, and a lot of the just facilitation of the project after it initially gets going. Other good partnerships, the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition. Hi to Jennifer, thank you so much for all your help throughout this project. And then also the Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment, which of course runs the Mass TC site and is connected there. A couple of things I wanted to point out from the Shubel's Pond and West Falmouth pilots. Particularly in West Falmouth, a really big lesson that they stressed was that there was just a high amount of time required in community outreach, individualized homeowner attention, homeowner recruitment, and that future efforts needed to build in more time for that marketing and educating and sort of assistance. Of course, these are people's homes and they naturally have lots of questions about how this process will go and what the changes will look like. And these things just always take a lot of time. I think the Shubel's Pond project should definitely be commended for how attentive they've been to outreach and communication. They've noted that they've been in direct contact with over 60 homeowners throughout the process. They post regular updates and progress, and they have a website and a lot of background information that they provide to people. And I think that's really really important, and I sort of can't overstate how important it is to facilitate that sort of transparent communication with the community during these projects. So just a little bit on some of those strategies and how to potentially recruit. I think there are a couple of different justifications that might help convince homeowners who, some of which I imagine will be excited for the project regardless. Of course, there's a significant community health concern. I mean, there are a lot of emerging research about nitrates health impacts. And I mean, we drink water every day, right? All the time. We want to make sure that that's really as safe as possible. And I think there's no better justification than that, right? We don't want to be putting ourselves at risk when we turn on the tap. There's also an argument to be made that spending some now will save a lot in the longer run. We don't know, like the Barnstable Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan brings up the possibility of sewering in this area, but it would be decades away and definitely very expensive. And that's, I think there's so much uncertainty there that there's a good argument to be made to focus on this now, and also just the cost effectiveness that these could be 60% less expensive upfront and much less expensive over time as well in terms of fees and maintenance. It's certainly not set in stone, and this wouldn't be an imminent thing, but there's a possible regulatory future in which, to ensure, sort of groundwater safety and drinking water safety and fight eutrophication of the bays, that towns could start passing requirements on homeowners to update, when they sell or when they have to install a new system, that they have to go for, something that removes more nitrogen. And so homeowners might be, interested in that argument. If they can see, okay, well, there's some subsidy now, then I can save, in the future, if something like that were to come to pass. And some of, I'll go very quickly through this next stuff. I think, sending information in the mail is important to do ahead of time to give people a little bit of time to process things on their own, and then door-to-door recruitment is a good strategy. Holding public info sessions, putting up a website, having ways to solicit questions from the public. People interact, with these projects in very different ways, and it's important, I think, to try and capture as many of those avenues as possible. And then just overall to really be as transparent as possible, and to give regular updates and just make people feel like they're really a part of this project. I think one thing that they, in my program of study, they talk to us all the time about development projects, both domestically and internationally. And one of the key thing that comes back to in almost every single project is whether project organizers were able to facilitate trust with the community that they were working in. And it's not to say that trust isn't already here in Katuitt, but just that it's so important that can build upon itself, because that can really help a community become even stronger. And so I just want to finish by acknowledging the tremendous amount of help I've received from Scott and Jennifer throughout this report. And thank you guys again for letting me present.
Casey, thanks. That was great. Can you just go back to your slide that had the cost of the whole program? Because I think Mark made a good point. I made the same note. Just clarify that one. Yeah. How many systems this is for?
Yeah, this is for 15. Sorry.
All right. And just maybe add that to the slide for future use, because I think that's important. So this would be for the 15 that you're recommending. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So maybe questions from the commissioners or anybody, I guess, Tom, through you.
Yeah, I think anybody should have an opportunity to ask questions at this point, and we should open it up for public comment and public questions if anybody has any. Myself, you had just answered my question, and it was the same one that Mark had, but I see Mark has his hand poised and he still has something to ask. So let's hear from Commissioner Robinson, please.
Casey, really nice presentation. Can you go back to I think one of the first slides that showed the land uses of the different parcels?
Yeah.
So that's just for one of the wells. We have 3 out there.
Right, that's just well one. I
Okay.
have the parcels for the others
Yeah.
as well, but this is just the one.
So I think just adding that, this is for one of 3 wells in the main well field.
All right.
And then you've got the land use types. I assume you got those from the assessor class codes, land use class codes.
Yeah, I believe so. I got it from a publicly available Barnstable GIS layer.
Right. And so whenever you're doing these very site-specific studies, it's important to do some ground truthing. I don't know if you've had a chance to come to it, but so that industrial site, I think, may have been the old gas station that the Center for the Arts has taken over and turned into a pottery studio or something. So it's not really industrial. It's kind of scary on the slide there. And the tax exempt parcels, you know, they would have a heavy flow of certainly of water, people going to the performances and all the classes that they have there. They must be one of our heaviest water users, Chris Wiseman.
Sorry, I was muted there, and I was trying to figure
Yeah.
out what part you were talking to about on the industrial.
Two water, I mean,
Would
sorry,
that be the
the,
old gas station or not?
It could be, I'd have to blow this up a lot more, tell you the truth, to figure that out. It looks like it
Well,
could
it's
be
next to
around-
the, it's next to the Center for Fine Arts, so that's the
Yeah,
one that they
so
bought.
if it's that-
Oh,
if it's the same one, it's probably part of now. Correct. And your second question, I'm sorry, I was still looking at that. Lot.
The Center for the Arts must be one of our biggest water users.
I don't believe they are actually,
No.
but they do have different units there. Jen, you can jump in on that with the, I don't believe they're even in our top 10.
Really,
I don't
I
hear
was
it.
going to say that maybe if they were, well, even if they're not, you know, a partnership with them, obviously should
Might
be a
help, yeah.
forward-thinking organization. It might be easier than some, you know, cash-strapped homeowners. I don't know.
Correct, yeah.
and if I can just jump in on the larger water uses, keep in mind that water use doesn't always equal wastewater generation. I'm guessing some of our big water users are, most of that's going on the lawn and not in the kitchen. So this still is probably a significant wastewater generator, even though it's not a big water user, because I don't think they're doing a lot of irrigation there. So yeah, always have to be careful about that disconnect between water pumping and wastewater generation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so we're talking about 15 out of the whole of the 3 wells. So if there may be 40 homes in each of the 3 zones, zone of contributions, that's, you know, 15 out of 100, 120 homes. Would that be right? I mean, is that going to be an impact? Is there going to be much of an impact in terms of actually lowering the amount of nitrogen, or is this just, you know, first phase and hopefully we'll get a lot more than 15 out of 120?
Yeah, I think the intent here was to pick one of the wells that is showing increases in nitrogen and then try to demonstrate that in fact doing this has results, like a pilot. And then if that works, which we think it will, then move on to some of the other wells and do the same thing. I think 15, Casey and I talked, and you know, we can actually model this, but I think 15 out of, I don't know how many we got here, maybe 40 or 45, a third. It should be enough to see a you know, a signal decrease in concentration. And I would try to argue, I mean, I think the closer you can get to the well, the better, if we have to prioritize some of these ones on the south end, but I think 15 would be enough to see a difference.
So what if you had 15 houses that had one person living in there, or they're only seasonally occupied for
Well, this may
3 months of the summer?
This may be a good point to bring Jennifer in, because she's dealing with this. She's dealing with this over at Schubel's Pond, and there's all kinds of different stuff going on at different houses.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
So Mark, what can you clarify for me?
Well, my point was, I think we don't want to just work with people who self-select. If we're
Yeah.
really trying to get bang for the buck, we want to try to pick houses where there's a lot of people living there year round. And of course, that
Yeah.
will change over time too, as houses sell. But, you
Yeah.
know, there are a lot of elderly singles still living in those little houses in the
Yeah.
Katuitt Commons. And
Based on experience, you present to a larger group. First of all, you should present to the ones that you target, because there's science behind it, why you've selected those houses. And then you go to the larger group and explain, you know, what the project is. And as Casey has said, transparency is important. So you let them know why certain homes were selected and they weren't. I can tell you some recent comments that have come to us from a Board of Health meeting that we were at yesterday. I don't know enough about this neighborhood, but you should really consider homes that are full-time residents versus seasonal. And there's a whole discussion of the importance of that, but I would recommend you go with year-round residents.
Right.
I
No,
would assume
I agree. So we would have some scientific bias in the selection of, first of all, we want to make sure we have enough people who want to work with us.
Yes.
And that gets to the subsidy and the,
Yep.
Our ability to have people understand and trust the results that we're looking for. But we also want to make sure that we're not subsidizing houses whose flow might not be very large. And then we're not really reducing the nitrogen enough. But so that's good that we would have the control over who was selected. And
Yeah, and that's exactly what we had over at Schubel.
Yeah.
We had full control.
Good.
Nobody
Good.
could opt in because they just wanted to opt in and get a free septic system.
Right, good, okay. The other thing was, Casey showed all the different grant programs, which is wonderful. As somebody who is, as some people know here, writes a lot of grants for a living, takes time and just to research and prepare applications. So we would have to be hiring a project manager. We could not be doing any of this program with existing staff, it seemed to me, other than maybe some monitoring tests. And
Yep.
is that what you do, Jennifer, on a full-time basis?
No, and I respect Casey for listing all those because they are important sources. But I can tell you for the Schubel project, the types of grants that Casey's listed, there's restrictions because this is these are systems going onto private property, and they, like the SNP grant, for instance, they wouldn't even look at an application because it's going on private property. So to answer your question, no, I'm not in the grant writing role, but we do look for how do we subsidize some of the equipment that we would like to use. And I think maybe somebody on the list that you could add is maybe the Cape Cod Foundation, and they could go to their donor restricted funds for individuals that have a passion around environmental issues. But some of these grant opportunities, it's because of private property.
Scott, how would you see this implemented in terms of staffing or consultants?
We're just starting to think about that. Of course, Casey's going to disappear here and move on to greener pastures. And Jennifer, I think one of the reasons it's been great to have Jennifer involved in this and attending our meetings is she's been doing this over at Schubel, so she can tell you better than anybody what it takes. And it's a time sink. So I think if we're going to do this, we need to get somebody like Jennifer, and maybe it is Jennifer if she has time, to help us do all of this, because there's a lot of time here. If we want to do it right and we want to be transparent, which I know we do, it takes more time, and to do it right. And there may be some grants. One of the ones that Casey did mention is the Cape Cod Septic Loan Program, which Brian Bumgardle at the Mass Tech Center is involved in. And that's looking like that's going to likely evolve into a good funding source for these INA systems. And that is available for private property. So that's in my mind, that might be one of the best ones. So part of it would be hunting down grant money, but I think dealing with the homeowners is key. I've just been watching, Jennifer and other people involved in that, and it's tricky stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's a super segue, I think, into our next presentation, I would think. And I'd like to, in the interest of preserving some time and moving the meeting along, I'd like to move on to that next presentation. But I also want to take an opportunity to thank Casey for his work, just as the other commissioners have, because I think it's amazing for us to be able to access this type of a preliminary study and get us to think about things and come up with some good ideas and opportunities for the district without any costs. And I truly appreciate that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed working on the project.
Yeah, yeah.
And we'll be getting
does-
a written report on this too. So.
Does anybody in the public have a comment? Jackie, Ben, hope you guys are good. Okay.
Sorry, Tom, could I just add one more thing?
Yeah, I wish you would, please.
Yeah, you know, I think at some point, getting a Rob Steen from the DPW involved and others in the town involved, and I know Scott has mentioned this several times, but as they listen more about it, and they're very familiar with the Schubel project, that could be maybe some diversion of some of the funds, and the town could support this financially.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Sorry, I also just wanted to mention something I forgot in the presentation is that these subjects have shown some promise at dealing with pharmaceuticals and some other contaminants of emerging concern as well. That they're just it's sort of like a magical microbial environment to some extent, and what they seem like they can remove. So I wanted to mention that.
Thank you for that, Casey. That's actually a note that I wrote down on here is, do they deal with any of the other chemicals of emergent concern, particularly the endocrine disruptors and maybe the PFAS and PFOS? And I'm sure they, to some extent, they will, which is.
Maybe Casey, you could add the town of Barnstable as Jennifer suggests on that list of potential funding sources.
Yeah, I'll add them in the report for sure.
Very much.
All right, why don't we switch gears here? Peter, I've already gave you a little bit of an introduction. I don't think you need more than that. So why don't you just jump in?
Thanks, Scott. Good evening, everyone. Nice to meet all of you, and thanks for having me. So I'm going to chat with you about the Cotuit Elementary School and some potential reuses that we're thinking about for it. All right, so just a bit more background about me and what I've done so far for this project. I'm a first-year Master's of Science Sustainability student at Tufts, and I joined on to this project with Scott because I'm in his low impact development class. And about a month ago, I got the opportunity to visit the site on a beautiful sunny day. And we visited with David Anthony, who provided me with lots of different site plans for the building itself, as well as the landscape and some environmental assessments, both specific to the hydrology and specific to the building itself. So first, to touch on the environmental conditions, I'm sure probably you are aware of the hydrological impacts of the site. And so first and foremost, it is characterized as Group A soil, sitting on Group A soil, which has high infiltration rates. So whatever substances are on the top soil will easily be filtered through that soil down into the groundwater and impacting the well sources, which thanks to one of Casey's reports from last semester, they did identify that there were elevated nitrogen levels, particularly at well number 3, and that drinking source, specifically from wastewater, fertilizer, and impervious surface runoff. And most importantly, almost the entirety of this school's site sits within the Zone 2 contributing area for well number 3. So when we're thinking about, in the group I'm working with, when we're thinking about the types of reuses to propose for this site, our first consideration is what types of wastewater or other pollutants may be ending up in that drinking water source. And we have the goal to try to minimize that, or even potentially have a net positive impact through some nature-based solutions in terms of removing pollutants from the wells. So some considerations for reuse as opposed to demolition. I know the school committee, I think, has looked at some basic sort of cost benefit analysis stuff about the cost to demo the building and just start fresh versus to try to renovate it and redevelop it. So these are some criteria that I found from a paper that discusses what you should consider when thinking about a reuse. And looking at these bullet points, luckily, based on the site plans I've looked at and some of the environmental assessments, there's a lot more going for the building in terms of a case for reuse than is going against it. It has pretty good structural integrity, nice thick walls that are already energy efficient. It has good ceilings, sealant on the windows. The only negative about the building structure is the roof does need to be replaced. But other positives include the building has a great location right across from Lowell baseball field, which gets a lot of community attention, and right down the road from markets and sort of other town services. On the negative side, there are a lot of hazardous materials. Being a building that was built several decades ago, it has things like asbestos and other hazards that would need to be remediated before certain uses could be put in place at the building. As well, there are some issues with some of the mechanical and plumbing structures that would need to be updated. But overall, my general sense is that this is a great opportunity to reuse the building. Here, just some site view images that I took. On the left, we have the multi-purpose room, which houses a gymnasium, a kitchen, and a stage. And this is an example of one of the rooms in the building that is structurally really sound. It has this beautiful wooden archways and timber and things like that. There are no hazardous materials in this section of the building. And so that end of the building is really primed and ready to go for a lot of different uses, from community spaces and other things like that. And then on the flip side, on the right, we have an image of one of the classroom buildings, which most of the classroom buildings do contain asbestos and other hazardous materials that would need to be remediated. But you can see there, it's a great, all the rooms are great size. They do already have access to plumbing and heating, and most of the rooms have these gorgeous double paned windows that are nice and insulated as well. So what's sort of presupposing all of this in terms of the reuse of the building is thinking about this in a sustainable way. The UN defines sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And sustainability encompasses really three main pillars: the economy, the society or the community, and the environment. And there are lots of different models of how people relate or think about the relationships between these different pillars, if you will. And so the three nested dependencies model is one that's a really strong framework for thinking about sustainability and putting it into practice. And it, as the visual represents, it supposes that the economy is based upon the society, which is based upon the environment. And all in the health of each of these three circles are really interdependent upon one another. And of course, there are some conflicting perspectives within each circle about what may be beneficial to each circle, but at the end of the day, they are all connected and can work well together. So in terms of sustainability of this site, we're thinking about uses that can meet these three pillars of sustainability and also do it in a way that at the end of the day is going to reduce the wastewater impact to the site because how close it is to well number 3. So Casey chatted with you about the nitro systems for residential use. I'm going to propose a nature-based wastewater system that is sort of a next level from the nitro system, in that these wastewater systems are completely circular and have the ability to draw out nutrients from the environment. And so this work is based off of John Todd's work at the New Alchemy Institute and some of the technologies that he has developed throughout the years, specifically 2 technologies, one called the Greenway, which is the image to the left at the Cape Cod Arc, and eco toilets. And there are 4 different types of eco toilets. I'm not going to go into each one. We can certainly talk about them later if you want. But there's a variety to choose from. And at the end of the day, these types of systems, what they do is they take the wastewater that's generated on site, and instead of putting it into a traditional or even the nitro septic system that eventually leaches down into the groundwater, these systems capture what we consider waste and utilize plants and microorganisms that utilize our waste as nutrients. And through that process, the plants and microorganisms are actually cleaning and filtering out the water, that water can be repurposed in a circular design back into the toilet systems on the property. And so here's a really great example of this in practice. This is Vermont's Visitors Center in Sharon, Vermont. The picture on the right is the outside of the wastewater portion of the Visitors Center, which you can go and walk in and learn about how the system works. And they call it the living machine because it's doing what I just said. It's taking the wastewater from visitors traveling on the highway and cleaning it with plants and microorganisms, and then putting it back into the toilets to be used again. And another great benefit to these types of systems, which is something we, as the working group, would hope to have if this system were put into place at the Cotuit Elementary site, is it has a really strong educational component. So this left image is a placard that sits above the urinal in the restrooms there, and it tells you, so the wastewater or the toilet water is colored a certain color so that people won't try to drink it or use it as potable water. And so it gives you a little description and education about why that is, and of course invites you to check it out in real time. And so that educational component is something that's really key, or a good positive benefit of this type of system, in addition to the environmental benefits. So you can see how the system is incorporating environmental benefits as well as societal or community benefits too. And so this project is really at an early stage. So this is sort of wrapping up my presentation with our next steps as a group. And I want to share with you some potential uses that we're thinking about. So our next step in the long term would be to perform a community needs assessment of the community of Cotuit and the larger community of Barnstable to really identify what types of uses would be beneficial for the community that this site would be serving. And right now we're thinking we could definitely do some things around community gardening that would link up with the wastewater system, things like indoor and outdoor farmers markets. So on the left is an image of an indoor farmers market. And so you can sort of imagine the people in those tables in the gymnasium there, and it could serve as a really great meeting place and an indoor farmers market during the winter time, for instance, or like a swap shop. So there's a lot of different uses that this site could encompass. And that's all I got for you. So I welcome any questions or comments.
I'll just add, thanks, Peter. That was great. We've talked a fair amount about other uses, but we also want to be careful about getting out too much in front beyond what other people and other groups are doing. But I think it's been really helpful to work from what Peter kind of portrayed as starting with, you know, a sustainability principle and kind of agree up front that anything we do here, and I think this is consistent with our water commissioner comments going way back on this property, whatever happens here, there's got to be, you know, a net improvement from where we're at or where we were at historically. And I think, you know, there's some exciting opportunities. So I'll stop there and see if there are other questions for Peter.
Does anybody have any other questions for Peter? Mark.
Well, I get another fine presentation. My opinion of Tufts has gone way up. I'm very impressed with these presentations, the ones we've had in the past. But in any case, I think that you're right to stop here, Scott and Peter. But I think that this is sort of an important, you know, preface introduction to the other needs assessments that the district is going to be doing. We voted money last spring to have that kind of feasibility study needs assessment done. And instead of just you know, passing word about being water quality sensitive, these kind of slides show the type of thinking that committee and consultant need to do as part of their overall thinking.
Yes.
You know, I do have just one personal comment. I mean, my kids went through that school. I think Tom did. Maybe
did.
Chris
Well,
did.
I was there a little
Huh?
bit. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And you somehow you survived the asbestos, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think, isn't the asbestos mostly floor tile stuff? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
This,
Yeah, and the heater, I think, is wrapped in it down in the basement.
Pipe wrappings.
Yeah.
Insulation.
Right down where I go and test the backflow device that used to be down there. I used to have to rub up against it to do it.
With your mask on, right?
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah,
great. I think the school subcommittee, and Jackie, you could maybe share some thoughts here if you'd like as well, but I think they're at a point now where there's still just trying to work with the town on the transfer mechanism before we move down the road too far. But a lot of people in the village are thinking about alternative uses of this site. And I think to bring a presentation and a perspective like this to that group is going to be very helpful. And I thank you for putting this together for us. And I hope you're going to be around for a little bit, so maybe we can pick your brain some more.
Got another year
welcome,
of
yeah.
study going.
Right?
Yep. Thank you.
Tom, you know, I would just add that, you know, my own thinking, and I'll put on my water commissioner hat here. You know, when this first came before us, my quick knee-jerk reaction was, no, we don't want any, you know, we really should not have any uses here that could threaten the well. As you know, as I've thought about it more, and especially gone through this process with Peter and talking with others, I think it could be, there could be some uses of the property that, as Peter suggested, could actually be not only mitigate any impacts, but also serve as a really good educational site where we could demonstrate. I mean, this wastewater system that he's putting out here is an interesting one that I've known about for quite some time. And John Todd's a really interesting guy from Woods Hole and really worked all around the world on some of these alternative systems. If we did something like that was highly visual and really, in fact, did work as well, I think that it really could not only mitigate any threats to the well, but also serve as really a really good place to think about, or rethink is a better term, about how we deal with wastewater, which right now is just to kind of get rid of it.
Which I think he so properly pointed out helps the society and eventually the economy, and that's just a win-win, which we really appreciate. Jackie, I noticed that you turned your mute off. Do you have any thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, it's just nice to see someone else outside of the village looking at this as Peter has. And I wanted to thank him for his presentation and for looking at this. It really is an important piece of our community, and what happens to it is critical to the community in other ways besides just the environmental concerns. And so thank you, Peter.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else have questions or want to share any thoughts with Peter or Casey or
Jennifer
Chris?
Lockman.
Because I think Chris is on his way out. He's got another commitment. So
See, Jennifer has her hand up.
Has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Nice
thanks,
job.
Peter.
Nice job, Peter. So I'm wearing my Katuitt resident hat right now. So, and forgive me for not being up on Village News, but as the school committee looks at this property, is one of the options to tear the thing down altogether? And my question is not saying I want it to tear it down, but I'm just trying to understand what the options are right now.
Yeah,
Yes.
good question. The presentation that I received, which I think was the most recent school committee meeting, they had addressed both options, and I think they're openly thinking about it, but someone else may know more than I do.
Yeah, the village accepted the concept of the intergovernmental transfer, that is the transfer of the land from the town to the district, expecting that it would not cost us any money for the transfer to occur, but that we would have $1 million liability to tear the building down. So that's where we started the conversation, really. And knowing that that it's worth $1 million to protect the land if we have to tear the building down. If it costs, and then it's up to the community to figure out what they want to do with the building. Otherwise, we're operating from the assumption that it's going to cost us $1 million to tear it down.
So anything less than $1 million is great.
Yeah, and there's lots of things that could be done that are just going to kick the can down the road too.
Right.
But that's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to get the transfer done, and then community needs assessment needs to happen, and that's a whole political process unto itself.
Thank you.
Indeed. Good question. Thank you. All right, if there's nothing else, I'd like to go back up to our prior meeting minutes and go through kind of our general business for tonight. And Commissioners Robinson and Horsley, have you had a chance to look at those meeting minutes from February 16th, 2022 and March 16th, 2020?
I have, and I'm about to make a motion, but let me again thank Peter and Casey. I know they have to run to a class, so I want to let them not feel awkward leaving here. I'm sure they're very interested in our approval of the minutes, but so
Yeah,
thank
I
you
am going to
guys.
run to class, but
Thank you guys
speak to
again.
you all, and
Appreciate
thank
it.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all again. Have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
But Mr. Chairman, I have read the minutes and I would move approval of them with
I
no
second.
changes.
Second
Okay,
motion.
I'll put them as well. We have a motion to approve the minutes from February and March, and a second, and all in favor?
Aye.
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 It's unanimous. Minutes are approved. Let's see, we've gone through the old business, except for the frequently asked question document review and approval to post. And I did see that those were attached here. I have not had a time to look at them since the last time I looked at them. I looked at them quite
Well,
back.
I
in the
just
fall.
changed. I just made some changes, suggestions today, Tom.
Okay,
So there's no need to have to rush. This is kind of something that's important, I think, but not urgent. And let people have a chance to review it. But I like to start that again. I think the students worked on, Scott.
right.
I did some wordsmithing, but I also,
Good.
as you see, have some questions that I think if Chris and Jen or whoever could answer, I think that would.
One of them, I think,
Excuse
was
me,
the
right
tank.
back.
I think you had something about the tanks. One was installed in 2010 and one was 2016.
Yeah.
And I think there was something else on there you had on explaining a little more on
The
something.
treatment.
I'd have to
facility.
sit down and look at it again.
The treatment facility. Mark, my only comment on the one that had the tank information in there is that we may want to separate those out. We can do some more editing, but we may want to separate that out from the operating and maintenance budget because
Yeah.
the money that pays down the principal and interest on those tanks comes from the admin budget, not from our operating maintenance.
Oh,
not
good.
part of the
Okay.
facility.
So I just learned something right there. Good. Thank you.
So I'll recirculate the document with your edits, with the information that Chris and I put in about the treatment facility, and we'll put it on the agenda for the next
Yeah.
meeting.
What was, there was a sentence there about there's a conservation restriction on the well fields. I don't understand what that is all about.
Yeah, that's basically just a drinking water protection zone. So, I mean, that's what we go by for restrictions. It's, you're not supposed to have vehicles of any kind driving around, it's all
Yeah.
that's.
Right. So I think we just need to change that term. To me, in my business, a conservation restriction is a standalone legal document that gives a third party enforcement provisions. We're
Right,
not
maybe we
talking
could say
about that here.
drinking.
We're talking about a restriction on the use of the land that's mandated presumably by who, DEP?
Yeah, DEP or EPA watershed restrictions. We could even look out and see what the exact titles are on there.
Right. Right. The other old business that I have is I was I volunteered to craft a letter to some of the new developments in town regarding their use of salt on our roads to try to address the sodium impacts. And I still have yet to craft that, but I've been giving it a lot of thought. And I hope to have that for us by the next time we meet. I think I don't want to restrict it to just the new developments, I guess, and the ones that would contribute to well 5. I think that it needs to be a broader document that maybe goes out to everybody, because we all use salt in various ways, and some neighborhoods more than others. So so that's where I am with it, but I haven't forgot about it, and I know it's there in old business buried, because I said I'd do it probably a couple meetings ago, and I just been pretty busy. So, but I will get.
The only thing I just thought of is too bad Jennifer has left, because I think she lives in one of those developments, the Katuitt Meadows, I think it is.
Yeah.
Is that one of the ones associated with the well? I think well 5.
She
And
does.
she might
provided a name for us. Yeah.
She might even be able to help us. So it just occurred to me, I can try to reach out to her in the
She
meantime.
actually did give me some information.
Oh, she did? Okay.
To who to talk to and who to send it to. They have a property company that runs it over there that does everything. So they say a lot of the stuff should go through the property management company,
Okay.
and they'll make an official letter to everybody over there.
Good.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking that maybe it ought to be a little larger than just those, just like I said, just those 2 developments, and
I think that's a good idea, Tom.
come up to maybe a policy level for the water district and the water commission, that, we need to use alternative sources. We need to be more careful with what we use, including the fact that some of those things contain PFAS compounds.
I
So
think that makes sense.
I'm going to continue to think and work on that, and get it to you guys soon.
Okay.
New business. We have cybersecurity and leak adjustment requests.
Yes, all right. I can kind of hit a little bit on the cybersecurity here without going into too much detail. It is a public meeting, and if I told you all our securities, probably wouldn't be smart or anything like that, right? So as you know, we do have a closed loop system when we put in the fiber optics back about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I believe it was, to put in the video cameras, and we hooked the SCADA through the same system. It is a WAN system, which is the wide area network where the SCADA is, so that our consultants can get in, but they have a highly secure system that changes the password multiple times a day, so they can get in to do any kind of fixing that they have to do. And once we had our, I believe it was last year's Super Bowl, there was a cyber attack on a treatment plant down in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
The next day I called up our consultants, GHD, and they in turn sent me out an estimate to put on extra added firewalls and security on the system, and came down and worked with our local IT consultants, Secure Networks, and the 2 of them got together and installed about $9,000 worth of extra equipment that we had left over in the fund. So it was money that we already had. So we are over quite up to date right now, and I have just signed a maintenance contract with them. It's should handle all updates that have to be done, and they will be doing them. We can do more, and I've scheduled an appointment to talk to them a little more about it. If you feel as though you'd like to speak with their consultant, when I talk to him, I have to have somebody put it in layman terms for me, usually. Some of the stuff that he talks about. All I know is as long as we keep getting updates and we're doing it to the best of our abilities, I believe we're as secure as we can be.
That's great.
My point in bringing this up was, again, thinking as a consumer, the thought of a third party breaking into the Katuitt water supply and dumping our whole tank of sodium into it, is just, it would scare the hell out of me. And we might even want to write a little bit more on these frequently asked questions about just what you said, Chris, if we could put that in writing so that people, not just that we have cameras and that there's plans, but just this important stuff that you've said, a little bit more specific, that I think would reassure people. I have to say that one of my concerns is that a friend of ours who does a lot of consulting around the United States for water supplies and their security has told me that water superintendents' most typical password is password. So as long as we're not one of those, I'm partially reassured.
Well,
So
I
Chris,
can
we don't want you to
honestly
tell
tell
us the password, but tell us it's not password.
It is not password.
That's all we need to know.
Scott knows this fellow who does this consulting.
Okay.
Anyway, but let's try to add that paragraph, and maybe with you and Jen just putting down some sentences on it, we could include it. I don't think it needs to be a big deal, but again, the purpose of this is just it's a thought exercise, stuff that you know in your head because it's always been there and you're constantly using it on a day-to-day basis. People don't know, and
Right.
I see these people buying the big blue jugs of water at the Stop and Shop, and I want to go up and kind of shake them by the shoulders and say, you don't have to do that. You really don't. It's good. It's all good. But so the more we can do to reassure people about things like this, I think it's a good practice as a,
All right, we'll work on it.
yeah, just a paragraph.
Yep.
Thank you.
Excellent. How about leak adjustment request? I think we have
Um,
something from the Holy Ghost Society.
We do. So this is one of the ones I warned you was coming. So we did finally receive a letter from the Holy Ghost Society. And as you read, they were coming at it from sort of the hardship angle, but it really is a leak adjustment. They had a toilet leak, they had it repaired. They sent in their documentation and are looking for some release. And as you can see, the usage really was unusual for them and for their organization. So applying our normal leak adjustment procedures, our adopted leak adjustment procedures, doubling their highest usage in a 6-month period versus a 1-year period, as readings prior to 2019 were annual versus semi-annual. I have recalculated the bill to provide some relief for the organization at your approval. Their bill would have been $2,002. The $50 is the new minimum use. They have sent me a payment in good faith that I won't apply until didn't want to apply until anything had been resolved at tonight's meeting, but the adjustment would provide them some relief from this very unusual bill.
So would the adjustment then be a reduction of $682.25? So the new bill would be the $1,320?
Vice versa, the relief amount would be $1,300, bringing them down to $682.25.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, did we help them figure out how to fix the leak and move
I
forward?
can jump in on that. The leak actually happened in a toilet that they stuck a milk jug hanging on a wire, and the wire rotted and broke the milk jug off, and the wire got stuck in between, and it just kept running because they were actually trying to conserve water by putting a milk jug in the toilet. And the piece that they did it, the way they did it, it broke off and fell and left the running water. And they didn't check that for a week. It's a haul that they go check it once a week, sometimes twice a week, and someone didn't notice it at the time. So it was during that right after pandemic and everything else. I don't think they were having any meetings down there. They had some church meeting down there that stopped because they got too big. They went above the capacity, so they had to go out.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that, one time I
Yeah.
put a brick in the tank of my toilet, and next thing you
Yeah.
know, the brick had disintegrated.
Yes. All right.
Sometimes
Well-
the good deed goes punished.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
it seems,
I would recommend the leak adjustment suggested by Jen.
yes, I would agree. Do we need a motion on this?
Yes.
Yes,
Do I have a
please.
motion?
I move that we employ the leak adjustment suggested by Jen and her graph.
Second that.
Motion's been made and seconded that we provide a leak adjustment for the Holy Ghost Society, consistent with what Office Manager Nash has provided for us for the adjustment rate. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you. I think that gets us through. We do have, budget candidates night coming up, and budget's looking pretty good, I think. Ray had to work out some details and some problems that he had, and some shifts in where funds would come from. Are we all on board with that? Is everybody good with that? I don't know if Scott and Mark are even aware of those, but it's primarily around the new software programs for
Right,
billing.
so he wanted to include the annual fee for the new software into the operating and maintenance budget, the conversion fee as an appropriation, along with running the cost to run our existing software for one additional year, so that we could have them simultaneously to facilitate the conversion. That would be part of the appropriation, and there's a $4,000 buffer in there, just in case we need to convert more than the recommended history. Now, I can't remember if that was 3 years or 5 years, but we did put a provision in there just in case we needed it. So it's likely we would turn funds back in from that appropriation.
And I think wasn't there a separate article for the new purchase? So it wouldn't be part of our operating budget?
For the conversion cost, not for the operating cost.
I have a question for Jen, if I may. I don't remember, Jen, if and what we decided to put in this year's budget for the septic system upgrades that we just discussed earlier tonight. I think we had it and then we pulled it back, but I don't remember. Is there anything in there that we need to be prepared to explain at this meeting? Because that would be unique and different.
We had 20,000 for the test wells.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
75,000 for the service truck, 65,000 for electrical upgrades. So nothing for the innovative solutions until fiscal year 24.
Okay, that's right. I think we decided to hold off for a year. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the budget? And are all the commissioners available on the 17th, 24th? Well, the 24th is just voting. 17th and 25th.
Do we
Yes.
know what time it is on the 25th yet?
Yes, it should be on there. District meeting is the 25th.
We know
What time,
it is?
Chris, do you remember?
I think it's
Oh,
7.
I
Why
think
don't
it's 7, but I'm not sure.
the next meeting we would have would be the 18th also, I believe, if we do the third Wednesday.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to meet on the 18th, the day after budget candidates night, and, 6 days prior to the voting in the annual district meeting, 7 days away.
I think we could waive meeting in May. We don't have anything pressing. The FAQs can wait until June. That's fine.
Okay.
What else needs to be voted on in the meantime?
Yeah,
No, I
typically we
concur.
suspend that one.
That's typically what we've done, yeah. Like Jen just said.
Okay.
All right, good. So we should all be there this year. That'd be good.
Do you want to set the June meeting date?
Yes.
Do we, Do we know where the meeting is? Is it going to be at Freedom Hall or at the school?
It was on the Freedom Hall calendar that's on the
Okay.
webpage.
All right, I'm going to have to run.
So
I'm going to
Take
sign
care.
out. I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you.
Bye, Chris.
Chris.
Thanks, everybody.
So last year, we were at the school. And I think Commissioner Horsley, you were out of town.
Yes.
So I presented for that. The year prior, we were at the ball field.
Right. I remember that one. Yeah.
And Commissioner Robinson, I think you were tied up. So I
I was
presented that one. So I'm looking for like a little.
I was there. I was at the ball field.
You were there.
Yeah, I haven't missed any.
Did you present?
Yeah, I did. I got yelled at for irrigation policy. I had to argue with somebody.
Tom, you
I
did
remember
the
that.
special district meeting for the truck.
Oh, it was the special district meeting that was at the
Oh,
ball field?
okay.
That was just for the truck? I just remember sitting next to Mark Boudreau and elbowing him most of the evening. Trying to move him along. Okay, yeah, let's set our June meeting date then. And I'm pretty good for June. I'm gonna be out of town the beginning of June doing some stuff with our senior class because they have senior week and they asked me to chaperone some things. So,
15th is the third Wednesday.
and that would work for me. That does work for me. Scott, are you good with?
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
All right, let's set the next meeting for June 15th. In person? What do you think?
Yeah.
Well,
We talked about that when the weather was better. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's try it.
yeah. In person at Freedom Hall, and you know, if we haven't had any training on operating the the hybrid system that's there, then we'll just do the in-person thing. That would be nice.
I should report that I did meet twice with the bylaw committee, I think, since we last met. Perhaps the single most boring committee I have ever been on in terms of the discussion and the minutia. That doesn't need to go on the minutes, but the
You're
gist of it
being
is
recorded.
they've put new grammar on a lot of it. And I think the only substantive thing that came out of it was changing the dates for some of the filing of yearly reports from each department. So trying to move that up.
Oh, yeah, I remember that from the last meeting we had, right? They wanted to move that
Yeah.
back.
So anyway, I don't think there's anything worth discussing here.
Well, along those lines, I am scheduled to have a policy committee meeting on May 9th. And also I'm trying to figure out the agenda that I've seen is pretty thin, let's say. Like, you know, assemble, talk, adjourn. And I'm just wondering if either of you who might have some, you know, experience dealing with the policy committee, what kind of things might I think about bringing up here? Or if either of you have any thoughts that I should bring forward, because I really haven't given it a lot of thought.
I think that the biggest thing that I did when I was on the policy committee, and it might have been when I was on bylaws, but I think it was policy committee, was to help establish the stabilization fund for the water department. Other than that, it hasn't done a lot. I can recall. So I can't help you, Scott.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something that I should be.
No,
representing
Scott, just nod your head and adjourn.
there. Don't cause any problems.
Right.
Okay.
We literally spent a lot of time discussing whether it should be onshore or inshore.
Right.
Okay.
I won't
But
tell you how I
it's-
voted.
All right. We'll get that off off
Tom,
camera.
is there any connection to this elementary school discussion, which I know is a sensitive item, and I know you are on the committee,
I am, yes.
and is that related in any way to policy discussion or?
No, I don't think it will be.
Okay,
I think the commit, and it's kind of been, it's been interesting to me because the district approved funds for this year to do some things out there to help us with the transfer, and none of those funds have been expended, and it was pretty clear from the articles that they could have been, and I think they're gonna just push that to this coming district meeting. The next
Okay.
meeting. We haven't met since the last time I reported on that.
okay.
You never know. All right, are we all set then?
I think we're
I'll
good.
make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye,
Aye.
thank you.
See you on the
See you guys
17th.
at The district meetings too, right?
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
be there. We'll see you
Okay,
there.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.